All right, my love, the first card is the Eight of Pentacles, and this is already telling me why that smile at your phone is under his skin badly. Symbolically, this card is about focus, repetition, effort, and the thing someone keeps returning to even when they pretend they are busy with something else. And that is the psychological pattern here. He notices you. He notices the screen. He notices the smile. Then he tries to go back to what he was doing, but mentally, he is still there. Because the Eight of Pentacles is not chaotic energy. It is concentrated energy. So this is not somebody who is glancing over and forgetting about it 5 seconds later. This is someone whose mind starts working on the situation. Who texted you? Why did your expression change? Why did you look happier for a second? And more importantly, why did that bother him? That is the part he does not want to admit. The phone is becoming symbolic of a space in your life he cannot fully see. A private little world that does not include him. And when he watches you give your attention to that screen, especially when you smile, it reminds him that somebody else could be receiving the warmth, humor, softness, and attention he wants for himself. But look at the deeper message of this card. The Eight of Pentacles is also about investment. Emotionally, he has invested more in you than he planned. He may have told himself he was keeping things light. He may act occupied, composed, even indifferent sometimes. But his attention keeps circling back to you because you have become part of his mental routine. And here is where this gets interesting. He is starting to realize that if he keeps hiding behind work, distractions, jokes, or silence, somebody else may put in the effort he has been withholding. That thought? He hates it. Because this is no longer about who is texting you. It is about who is building a place in your life while he is still pretending he has time. And that is exactly why the King of Pentacles reversed is so revealing here. Because symbolically, this is what happens when somebody who normally wants to feel secure suddenly realizes they are not as secure as they thought. He does not know his place with you. And that bothers him more than he lets on. Because while he may look calm on the outside, there is this uncomfortable comparison happening underneath. What is somebody else giving you that he is not? Are they making you laugh? Are they checking on you? Are they having conversations with you that continue late into the night? Are they becoming the person you instinctively reach for when something happens? See, my love, that is where his mind goes. Not necessarily because there is somebody else, but because he knows there could be. And suddenly, he is looking at his own behavior differently. All those moments when he could have reached out but didn't. The conversations he could have continued. The reassurance he could have given you. The interest he felt but decided not to show. At the time, withholding probably made him feel safe. Now, it makes him feel exposed. Because he cannot expect to occupy an important place in your life while behaving like that place will simply remain empty for him. And your smile at that phone becomes proof of something he does not want to think about. Your life continues. Your attention moves. You connect with people. You enjoy yourself. You do not sit there emotionally frozen while he decides how vulnerable he is willing to be. That realization gets under his skin badly. And I do not even think he wants you to know how closely he notices these little changes. He may barely react, he may keep talking, he may look away, he may act like he did not see anything. But mentally, he is measuring. He is wondering whether somebody else is becoming consistent where he has been inconsistent, whether someone else is learning you while he has been protecting himself, whether someone else is slowly becoming familiar to you, and that is the real threat in his mind. Not one dramatic moment, accumulation. because that is how somebody builds a place in another person's life. Little by little, conversation by conversation, moment by moment. And somewhere underneath all this jealousy is a realization he has been trying very hard not to touch. He cares enough to be afraid, and that makes him far more vulnerable than he ever intended to be. And that vulnerability explains why his behavior can look so confusing from the outside. Because the stronger this gets internally, the more controlled he may try to appear externally. He stays busy. He keeps the conversation normal. He acts mature about it. Maybe he even convinces himself that he does not care. But then you look down at your phone, you smile, and something shifts. Because he does not just want your attention, my love. He wants to matter to you. There is a difference. Attention can be temporary. You can give someone attention for 5 minutes and move on. But emotional significance, that means being the person you think about later. The person you want to tell things to. The person whose name on your screen changes your expression before you even realize you are smiling. And that is what gets him, because somewhere inside, he wants to believe he already has that effect on you. He wants to believe you notice when he is absent, that you remember the things he says, that you feel the tension he feels, that there is already this unspoken understanding between the two of you. But here is the problem. He has been relying on the word unspoken a little too much, because from his perspective, maybe the looks were obvious. Maybe the attention was obvious. Maybe the way he remembers little details about you was obvious. Maybe he thinks you can feel the difference in the way he treats you compared to everybody else. So part of him is sitting there thinking, you have to know. But do you? Because feelings that stay hidden can feel enormous to the person hiding them and almost invisible to the person standing on the other side. And I think that is where some of his frustration comes from. He feels deeply enough that he assumes the depth must somehow be showing. Meanwhile, he has spent all this time trying not to show too much. Do you see the contradiction? He wants you to recognize something he has deliberately made difficult to recognize. And then when your attention goes somewhere else, even innocently, he feels almost offended by how easily life keeps moving. Not because you have done anything wrong, but because emotionally, he is reacting to a place he has never actually asked you to save for him. And that is the uncomfortable truth. He has hidden so much. So why does some part of him still expect you to know exactly where you stand? Because emotionally, he is judging the situation by rules he has never actually spoken out loud. And that is where this justice reversed energy becomes so revealing. There is an imbalance here. Part of him knows he cannot reasonably ask, "Who are you talking to?" He cannot demand an explanation. He cannot act like you have crossed some line when the line was never drawn in the first place. He knows that. But emotionally, that knowledge does not stop the reaction. Because the second he sees your attention shift somewhere else, his mind starts filling in everything he does not know. Is this somebody you talk to every day? Do they know things about you he does not? Are you waiting for their messages? Is that why you smiled like that? And the frustrating part is he may never ask, because asking would reveal too much. It would reveal that he noticed, that he cared, that he has been paying far more attention than he wants you to realize, so he stays quiet. And then the silence creates even more uncertainty. See how that works? He protects himself from one uncomfortable conversation and gives his imagination 10 more things to worry about. Because whatever is actually happening on your phone may be completely harmless. But uncertainty? Uncertainty lets his mind create possibilities, and some of those possibilities bother him badly. especially because you are not sitting around waiting for him to decide what this connection means. You have your own life, your own conversations, your own attention, and strangely enough, that independence makes him want you more. Because your attention means something precisely because he knows it is not guaranteed. You choose where it goes, you choose who gets access to you. You choose who becomes important, and that is the part he is finally starting to understand. His real fear is not that somebody is taking something that belongs to him. You do not belong to him. His fear is that while he kept assuming there would always be another opportunity, you may have been emotionally moving forward without him. That possibility changes the entire situation. Because now he is noticing time, he is noticing distance, he is noticing every moment when he could move closer and chooses not to. And my love, that fear is beginning to do something his jealousy alone could not. It is starting to change the way he behaves around you. And once that starts happening, the change may be subtle at first. Nothing dramatic, nothing that immediately gives him away. But he starts creating more opportunities. Maybe the conversation lasts a little longer than it needs to. Maybe he finds a reason to come back after it should have ended. Maybe he responds differently when you reach out because suddenly he is much more aware of what happens when he does not. That is the shift. He is beginning to calculate the cost of doing nothing because before, silence felt safe. Silence protected him from rejection. It protected his pride. It allowed him to stay close enough to feel something without having to define what that something was. But now, silence has a price. Because every time he holds back, there is this thought underneath it. What if somebody else does not? What if somebody else asks the question he was too cautious to ask? What if somebody else remembers what you told them, follows up, makes you laugh, and becomes part of your day without making everything so complicated? And suddenly, my love, waiting does not feel nearly as comfortable. So he notices your availability more. He pays attention to when you seem distracted. He remembers little things because those little things give him another reason to talk to you later. And when you do give him your attention, he may hold on to the moment longer because now he understands that your emotional world does not stop when he leaves the room. You can be happy without him. You can be entertained without him. You can feel connected without him. And strangely, that makes your attention feel more valuable. Because when you choose him, he knows it is actually a choice. That realization creates urgency, not panic. Urgency. There is a difference. He is starting to understand that if he wants a real place in your life, eventually he has to make that place visible. He cannot keep communicating through looks, tension, timing, and things he hopes you somehow understand. At some point, he has to give you something clearer, something you can actually respond to. But even clarity is only the surface of what he wants. Because underneath the desire to finally tell you where he stands is something much more uncomfortable for him. He wants to stop wondering how easily someone else could stand there instead. And that is where this gets more intense because he is not only wondering whether someone else could get your attention, he is wondering whether someone else could become important to you in a way he has been quietly hoping to become important himself. That is different. Because now we are talking about emotional territory, not ownership, not control, significance. He wants to know that when something funny happens, he is one of the people you want to tell. When your day goes badly, he wants to be someone you think of. When your phone lights up and that little smile appears, he wants to know he could be the reason. And imagining somebody else occupying that space bothers him. because those are the parts of you he actually wants access to. The private conversations, the inside jokes, the random messages that make no sense to anybody else, the softness you give when you feel comfortable, the version of you that does not have to perform. That is what he wants. And my love, chemistry alone cannot give him that. That is the realization. He can feel the attraction. He can notice the tension. He can convince himself that there is something between you. But none of that automatically gives him a place in your life. He has to build one. Because you are not emotionally sitting there with an empty chair and his name written on it. You have a full life. You have your own rhythm, your own people, your own reasons to smile. And ironically, that makes him want to matter even more. Because he knows your attention is not something he can simply assume will remain available. So when I say there is this energy of wanting to claim the connection, I do not mean he wants to control you. I mean, he is getting tired of feeling undefined. He wants something that tells him, I matter here. There is a difference between me and everybody else. There is a place for me that is actually mine because we both chose it. And that distinction matters. Because he does not just want access to you. He wants mutual recognition. He wants to stop wondering. And the surprising part is that your confidence makes that desire stronger. You are not chasing him for answers. You are not organizing your life around his hesitation. You can enjoy yourself without his participation, and that independence, it is becoming one of the biggest reasons he cannot emotionally detach, and that is exactly why the Ten of Swords matters here. Because psychologically, this is the point where an old strategy stops working. He cannot keep telling himself that distance protects him. He cannot keep assuming that if he stays quiet long enough, you will somehow stay emotionally available in exactly the same way. That idea is starting to collapse. And your independence is what exposes it. Because you have an inner world he does not automatically get access to. You have conversations he is not part of, routines that do not involve him, people who know different versions of you, things that make you laugh when he is nowhere around, and that smile at your phone, it reminds him of all of it at once. There are parts of your happiness that exist completely outside this connection. And instead of making him lose interest, it does the opposite. Because now he understands that getting closer to you actually means something. Your attention is not automatic. Your softness is not automatic. Your emotional availability is not something he receives simply because attraction exists between you. He has to be invited into that world. And, my love, that is a very different position from the one he may have thought he was in before. Maybe he believed he was controlling the pace. Maybe he thought he could decide when to move closer and when to pull back, when to show interest, when to disappear into whatever else he had going on. But now he is realizing something. You have been making choices too, quietly, every day. You decide who gets your time, who gets your replies, who gets your stories, who gets to know what actually happened in your day. And suddenly, he understands that the door does not stay open simply because he wants it to. That realization? It hits hard because wanting you is easy. Being attracted to you is easy. Watching you and wondering about you is easy. What is harder is becoming somebody you would genuinely choose to let closer. And I think this is where the passive part of this begins to reach its limit. The watching, the waiting, the internal conversations. They can only take him so far, because once he understands that your independence is not a threat, but the very reason your attention feels valuable, something has to change. Wanting you is no longer enough. Now he has to decide what he is actually willing to do about it. And what he is willing to do is starting to look less like watching and more like participation. Because effort is different from interest. Interest notices, effort follows through. So you may start seeing him become more consistent in small ways. If you tell him something important, he remembers it. If he says he is going to reach out, there is more pressure inside him now to actually do it. If a conversation could easily end, he may find another question, another reason to stay, another opening, because he is quietly trying to find out whether there is still room for him to move closer. And, my love, there is something almost ironic about that. Remember where this started. He was bothered by the possibility that somebody else could be putting in the effort he was withholding. Now he is realizing that sitting there worrying about another person's effort does absolutely nothing to strengthen his own position. He has to become consistent. He has to become present. He has to give you something real enough to notice. And that can be uncomfortable for somebody who has spent so much time managing how much emotion he reveals. Because the moment he starts showing up differently, you can see it. If he checks in more often, you notice. If he remembers something small you mentioned 3 days ago, you notice. If he suddenly seems more interested in when he will see you again, you notice. And then he has another problem. How does he explain the change? Because he cannot increase the effort forever while continuing to pretend there is no emotional reason behind it. At some point, his behavior starts telling on him. That is where the tension becomes very different. Before, he was afraid that saying too much would make him vulnerable. Now he is beginning to realize that doing too little could cost him something he actually cares about. And between those two fears, the second one is becoming stronger because vulnerability may be uncomfortable. But watching you slowly become less available, that would hurt more. So the question in his mind is changing. It is no longer simply, how much should I show? Now it is, how long can I keep this undefined before the uncertainty itself becomes worse than finally telling you what I want? And he is getting dangerously close to his answer. And that answer is forcing him into a place he has been avoiding because eventually, my love, wanting something privately is not enough. You have to choose it openly. And that is where this becomes difficult for him. Because choosing you openly would mean admitting that this matters. It would mean admitting that your attention affects him, that your distance affects him, that seeing you smile at that phone has been getting under his skin for reasons that are much deeper than simple curiosity. He would lose the ability to pretend. No more hiding behind, I was just wondering. I was just being friendly. It is not that serious. Because if he finally tells you what he actually wants, then you get to answer. And that is the vulnerable part. What if you have other options? What if somebody else has already become important? What if all the time he spent protecting himself gave you enough time to stop expecting anything from him? Those questions are becoming harder to ignore, but here is the deeper shift. He does not just want your attention anymore. He wants to know there is a place for him in your future. That is why the little things suddenly feel so big. The message, the smile, the moments when you seem occupied with your own world, they remind him that your life is moving, and he has to decide whether he wants to move with it. Because he has invested emotionally while behaving as though he has not. He has cared while acting composed. He has watched while delaying. And now all of those contradictions are meeting in the same place. He cannot keep wanting the benefits of closeness while avoiding the risk required to create it. That is the truth. And if he wants to claim anything here, it cannot be you as a person. It has to be his place in this connection. By choosing it, by showing it, by risking enough honesty to find out whether you choose it too. Because you are not waiting indefinitely for someone to become ready. And I think he is finally understanding that. But there is one question left, my love, because his feelings may be deep, his jealousies may be revealing, his effort may even begin changing. But what actually makes any of that worth something to you? That is where this reading has to go next. And what makes it worth something to you is not how intensely he feels it. It is what he does with those feelings. Because, my love, jealousy by itself proves very little. Wanting you proves very little. Even being afraid to lose you does not automatically create the kind of connection you deserve to trust. What matters is whether all of that emotion becomes something real. Consistency, honesty, presence, a willingness to stop hiding behind pride and actually let you know where you stand. Because look at how this entire situation started. One smile, one little moment with your phone, and suddenly everything he had been keeping neatly contained started showing itself. His attention exposed his investment. His investment exposed the fear. The fear exposed how badly he wants to matter. And once he realized how badly he wants to matter, he also had to confront the fact that wanting a place in your life and earning that place are two completely different things. That is the lesson underneath all of this. He cannot claim you by becoming more jealous. He cannot claim the connection by watching more closely. He cannot secure his position by silently hoping nobody else gets there first. He has to show up. He has to choose you in a way you can actually recognize. And then you get to choose too. That part matters. Because this was never about you proving that nobody else has your attention. It was about him realizing that your attention is valuable precisely because it belongs to you. You decide where it goes. You decide who receives your softness. You decide who earns deeper access. And if he wants to become that person, then he has to give you something stronger than tension and possibility. He has to give you a reason. So now, when I come back to that smile at your phone, it feels completely different. At first, he saw competition. Then he saw uncertainty. But underneath all of that, he saw a reminder. Your happiness is alive. Your life is moving. And nobody gets a permanent place in it simply because they secretly want one. That little smile forced him to see what he had been avoiding. If somebody else can build a place in your life while he keeps pretending he has time, then the answer is not to resent the possibility. The answer is to stop wasting the time. Because in the end, my love, he does not just want your smile. He wants to earn the chance to be the reason for it.